I always knew my family could perform happiness better than they actually felt it. That night at my parents' wedding anniversary, they proved it again, on a stage built from decorations, laughter, and carefully arranged guests who were there more for appearance than affection. The hall was glowing. Golden lights hung from the ceiling like artificial stars. My mother had personally chosen every flower arrangement, and my father had insisted on inviting everyone who could possibly increase his social image. Relatives filled every corner, dressed in expensive clothes, smiling too widely, speaking too loudly. Everything looked perfect, almost staged like a celebration meant for photographs rather than emotions. And then there was me. I stood near the edge of the crowd, holding a small gift I wasn't even sure they would accept warmly. I had spent days thinking about it, something meaningful, something that might finally make them see me differently. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I wasn't here as their pride. I was here as their example of what not to become. My cousins arrived late, of course, the successful ones. One was already working abroad. Another had just bought a new car, and the moment they entered, my parents lit up in a way they never did for me. My mother hugged them tightly, her voice overflowing with pride. My father clapped one of them on the back like he had raised him personally. And then, as if it was natural, the comparisons began. "Oh, look at him," my aunt said loudly, pointing toward me with a smile that wasn't kind at all. Still in the same job, right? A few people chuckled. I forced a smile. I wanted to disappear into the floor. My mother laughed too, lightly at first. "He is stable," she said, as if the word itself tasted disappointing. "At least he's not jobless." Another wave of laughter followed. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through me. My father didn't stop it. He never did. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to remember it was just a party. But something inside me was already tightening, like a thread pulled too hard for too long. Then came the toast preparations. People gathered around, glasses filled, attention slowly shifting toward the center where my father would speak. I stood still, expecting the usual polite speech about love and marriage and gratitude. I should have known better. My father tapped the glass, the room quieted, he smiled first, that proud, controlled smile he always wore when he wanted to impress others. "Today," he began, "is a celebration of 25 years of marriage." Applause followed. Then his eyes shifted toward me. That's when I felt it, that familiar sinking feeling, not surprise, recognition. He continued, "In these 25 years, we've learned many things, including how children can turn out very differently from what you expect." A few guests chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. My mother laughed softly beside him, and then he said my name. I didn't even realize I had started holding my breath. "He's our interesting case," my father said, smiling wider now. "Not every child becomes successful, but at least he gives us stories to tell." The room reacted instantly. Laughter, some loud, some awkward. A few people glanced at me with discomfort, but most looked away too quickly to matter. My face burned, my hands went cold. My mother added almost playfully, "He was always different. We just didn't expect this level of difference." More laughter. It felt unreal, like I was standing outside my own body watching strangers talk about me. Something inside me cracked, but quietly, not dramatically. No explosion, just a slow, irreversible break. I looked at them, my parents smiling proudly in front of everyone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their child. I felt like their entertainment, and the worst part wasn't the laughter of the guests. It was how normal my parents made it seem. As if humiliation was love, as if breaking me publicly was just another part of celebration. That night, under the golden lights and fake warmth of family pride, I understood something I had been avoiding for years. I was never standing inside their circle. I was always standing in front of it, meant to be talked about. The applause after my father's speech faded too quickly, like even the room didn't want to sit with what had just been said. But the damage stayed. It lingered in the air, thick and invisible, wrapping around me as people returned to their conversations, pretending nothing unusual had happened. I stood still. That was the strangest part, not screaming, not leaving, not reacting. Just standing there while my insides shifted into something unfamiliar. It felt like watching my own identity get rewritten in real time, and I had no control over the pen. My father stepped down from the small stage area, satisfied, greeting guests again, as if he had delivered a charming joke. My mother followed him, smiling warmly, adjusting her jewelry, laughing softly whenever someone praised the speech. She looked proud not of me, but of how well the moment had gone. I remember thinking, did they even hear what they said? Or do they only hear themselves when it makes them look good? A cousin approached me, patting my shoulder awkwardly. They didn't mean it like that, he said, but he didn't wait for my response. He walked away before I could even decide whether to forgive or explode. That's when I noticed something worse than the humiliation itself. No one defended me, not a single person. Not even the ones who had known me since childhood, who had eaten at my home, who had smiled at my achievements when they were small and invisible. Here in this room I wasn't a person, I was a role in someone else's story. I slowly walked toward the corner of the hall, pretending I needed air. My hands were shaking now, not from anger alone, but from the strange realization settling in my chest. This wasn't a one-time joke. It was a pattern I had been living inside my whole life. Every achievement I had ever made was minimized. Every failure was amplified. Every step forward was followed by a reminder that it wasn't enough, and tonight they had turned it into a performance. My mother passed by me while talking to a guest. She didn't even glance at me. "He's sensitive," she said casually, like she was describing a minor inconvenience. Don't take him seriously. Sensitive, that word hit harder than the jokes, because it meant my pain wasn't real enough to matter. It meant I was the problem for feeling it. I looked at her for a moment, expecting, hoping. She might pause, maybe sense something wrong. But she didn't. She just adjusted her smile and moved on. Something inside me started shifting then. Not breaking anymore. Something colder, sharper. I began seeing things differently. The laughter around me wasn't innocent. It was permission. The jokes weren't accidental. They were repeated patterns disguised as culture. Even the silence of the guests wasn't neutrality. It was agreement. And my parents weren't unaware. They were comfortable making me smaller so they could feel larger. I walked toward the refreshments table, not because I wanted food, but because I needed to do something with my body. Anything. I picked up a glass of juice, but my hand refused to stop shaking, so I set it down again. A younger relative, maybe 10 or 11, looked at me curiously. "Why did Uncle say that about you?" he asked innocently. That question almost broke me more than the speech. Because children ask without filters, without cruelty, without understanding the weight of what they're touching. Before I could answer, an older relative pulled him away, laughing nervously. "Don't bother him with nonsense," she said. Nonsense. That was what they called my life. I turned away and walked toward the exit doors slightly, not leaving yet, just testing the idea of it. The air near the entrance felt different, less heavy, less fake. Behind me, the celebration continued. Music restarted, laughter returned, plates clinked, glasses raised as if nothing had happened, but something had. Inside me, a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. I realized I had spent years trying to earn dignity from people who didn't believe I deserved it in the first place. I had mistaken endurance for strength, silence for maturity, acceptance for love. And now, standing at the edge of that hall, I saw the truth clearly for the first time. They didn't see me as someone to protect. They saw me as someone to display. And once you understand that, you don't go back to being blind. You just decide how long you can stay in the room. The celebration didn't end when I walked away from the crowd. It continued like I had never existed in it at all. That realization followed me more than the humiliation itself. Outside the hall, the air was colder, quieter, almost respectful compared to the suffocating warmth inside. Cars lined up along the street, drivers waiting, guests still laughing as they exited in groups. I stood near the side entrance for a moment, watching people leave as if I were waiting for permission to exist outside the story I had just been erased from. No one noticed I was missing, or maybe they noticed and simply didn't care enough to ask. Inside my pocket, my phone kept vibrating. Probably messages, maybe calls. I didn't check. Not then. I already knew what they would say. Come back. Don't be dramatic. It was just a joke. You're too sensitive again. Sensitive. That word had started to feel like a chain around my throat. I walked away from the hall slowly, not running, not rushing. Something in me needed to feel every step. Each one was a quiet confirmation that I was choosing distance over dignity begged for. The streets were busy, alive with other people's ordinary nights, couples arguing softly, friends laughing over tea, vendors calling out prices. Life continued without interruption, without noticing that something in mine had just shifted permanently. I found a small bench near a closed shop and sat down. For the first time that night, I let myself stop performing. No forced smile, no controlled breathing, no pretending it didn't matter. It mattered. It all mattered. Every comparison, every joke disguised as affection, every moment I had been reduced in front of others just so my parents could feel entertained, powerful, respected. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the ground as if it might explain how I had ended up here, sitting outside my own life, trying to understand when exactly I stopped being treated like someone who deserved kindness, and then something surprising happened. I didn't cry, not immediately. Instead, there was silence inside me, a heavy, unfamiliar silence, not peaceful, decisive. It felt like something had finished breaking, and now there was only clarity left behind. I replayed the night in my head, but not as a victim anymore, as an observer, my father's smile, my mother's laughter, the guests' awkward silence that turned into acceptance, the way no one stopped it, the way I didn't stop it either. That was the hardest truth. I had stayed. Every time before tonight I had stayed. Every insult I had swallowed became permission for the next one. Every laugh I ignored became louder the next time. And I had called it patience, but it wasn't patience. It was conditioning. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A message from my mother. Where did you go? Don't embarrass us in front of guests. Come back. No, are you okay? No curiosity, just image management. I stared at the screen for a long time. Something inside me didn't react the way it used to. No urge to explain. No urge to defend. No urge to fix their perception of me. Instead, a calm thought formed, simple, sharp, irreversible. I am done returning to places where my absence is only noticed when it becomes inconvenient. I turned the phone off, not dramatically, just decisively. Then I sat there longer than I needed to, letting the world pass without me in it. A bus roared past the street. People crossed the road laughing. Life continued its rhythm, indifferent. And slowly, almost quietly, a decision formed, not loud, not emotional, but steady enough to reshape everything. I would not go back that night, not the next day, maybe not ever, because going back meant continuing the same cycle, being tolerated, reduced, reshaped for comfort, then blamed for reacting. I stood up, my legs felt heavier than usual, but not weak, just aware. As I walked away from the bench, I didn't know where I was going yet. I only knew where I wasn't going anymore. Back. The word itself started to feel like something I had outgrown. Behind me, the anniversary hall still glowed faintly in the distance, music spilling out into the night like nothing had changed inside it. But everything had changed inside me, not in a dramatic explosion, in something quieter. A line had been crossed, and I had chosen not to step back over it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about how to be understood. I was thinking about how to leave. The first few weeks after I left felt like walking through a strange in-between world. No longer part of their household, but not yet fully belonging to my own life. Either, there were moments when my phone would light up, names I knew too well appearing on the screen, and I would let it ring until it stopped. Each missed call was a reminder of how loud their silence could be when they suddenly needed me back in the role they had assigned. At first, they tried anger. Messages came with accusations. You're being dramatic. You've embarrassed us. You can't just disappear like this. Then came confusion. Where are you staying? Are you safe? Why are you doing this? But never once did they ask the question that actually mattered. What did we do to you? That question stayed unspoken, buried under pride too heavy to lift. I moved quietly, rebuilding my life in a way that required no audience. A small room at first, simple work. Days that felt ordinary on the surface, but unfamiliar in their freedom. There was no one comparing me, no one interrupting my existence with jokes disguised as family love, no one turning my presence into entertainment. Silence became something new, not the suffocating silence I used to feel in their presence, but space, room to breathe without explanation. I started noticing small things I had never paid attention to before. The way mornings didn't begin with tension, the way food tasted different when it wasn't eaten under judgment, the way my thoughts didn't have to pass through someone else's approval before existing. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the old voice in my head returned, the one that sounded suspiciously like my father's laughter or my mother's dismissive tone. It would whisper that I was overreacting, that maybe I had misunderstood, that family is supposed to hurt sometimes. But then I would remember that night, the anniversary hall, the laughter, the speech, the way I had stood there like a character in someone else's joke. And the doubt would fade. Months passed, then years. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. That's not how healing works. But it became mine, and that difference changed everything. I learned how to exist without shrinking myself first. I learned how to speak without rehearsing the reaction of others. I learned how to succeed without waiting for it to be minimized. Slowly, quietly, I built something they never expected, not revenge in the dramatic sense, but independence so complete it didn't require their recognition. Sometimes I heard updates through distant relatives. My parents still told stories about me, but the tone had shifted. I was no longer the funny disappointment. I had become the missing son, a conversation they didn't know how to finish. Occasionally, messages would still come, shorter now, less confident. We should talk. Your mother misses you. No acknowledgement of the past, no ownership of the pain, just a desire to restore normalcy without repair. I never replied, because I had learned something important. Returning without change is just repetition in disguise. One evening, I sat near a window in my small room, watching the city move outside. People were going home from work, laughing, arguing, living their lives without knowing anything about mine. For the first time, I didn't feel separate from them. I felt aligned. Not because I had become successful in the way my family once defined it, but because I had stopped measuring myself through their eyes. There was no dramatic confrontation, no final argument, no emotional apology scene, just distance, and in that distance, clarity. They had expected me to come back broken, quiet, easier to control. Instead, I became unreachable. That was the part they never understood. It was never about revenge in the way they might imagine it. I didn't need to ruin them, expose them, or make them suffer. Life had already done something more effective. It allowed me to leave and continue, to grow beyond the story they told about me. And the most unsettling part for them, I later realized, wasn't anger, it was irrelevance. I was no longer participating in their narrative. I no longer needed their approval to define who I was, and that absence, quiet, irreversible, complete, became the final consequence of everything they did at that anniversary night. Not loud revenge, just a life that no longer included them.